Understanding what you're being told by Australia's media is often difficult. Here's how to do it. As an example, we're going to take the ABC's midday news from November 4th, 2021.
Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ros Childs. Cleo Smith has spent the night with her family. So it's been another big morning there. Tell us what's happening.
It certainly has. WA Premier Mark McGowan has just touched down in the town of Carnarvon, and he's brought with him two teddy bears wearing a WA Police Force uniform. Now, he's come to Carnarvon to thank and celebrate the work of the police force who, through dogged work, have found 4-year-old Cleo.
Now, beginning a news story by regaling the Premier is bad enough, but suggesting that he's in Carnarvon simply to celebrate and it's not some sort of publicity stunt, well...
Celebrity. He was walking down the main street of Carnarvon today getting waves and horns and, thumbs up from locals.
She seems pretty excited about the Premier.
Another person in town is Police Minister Paul Papalia, who's spoken to the media this morning. Take a listen.
I couldn't be more proud. Everyone in Western Australia is, and everyone around the country should be. This is, sadly, this isn't the outcome that you would normally expect in a situation like this.
Another politician taking his moment in the sunshine. But did you hear what he just said?
Sadly, this isn't the outcome that you would normally expect.
Sadly? It's pretty macabre.
Some people who, some parents who were attending school this morning, let's take a listen to them.
When Cleo come back, which is really, overwhelming, very happy.
Oh, just such a big relief. It's been great, it's for the community to feel whole again and not have that worry. It was a really tough couple of weeks. So.
How are you feeling about Cleo?
Oh, I'm very sad. 2 weeks. We very sad. We just always hope anything good for her and she can come back home and hope she can come back home early.
Now, I'm not going to pick on that lovely lady, but the ABC is such a quality media organisation that they put a clip in of a woman who doesn't even know that Cleo is home.
And Prime Ministers, Presidents and Princes have returned from climate talks in Glasgow.
The media's other darlings.
And now tough negotiations are underway to convert speeches into deals.
Pay attention to the words. It was speeches into deals, not plans into action.
The focus of the past day was on financing climate goals as a coalition of banks and insurers pledged trillions of dollars towards investing in renewable energy.
And there's an admission right there. Politicians don't come up with solutions to climate change. The finance sector does.
Even at a global summit to save the planet, money makes the world go around. Behind closed doors, finance ministers met to discuss a $130 billion fund for developing nations. It was promised a decade ago and was supposed to be delivered last year.
Oh yeah, they're really serious about climate.
The ambitions and enthusiasm of the private sector were on display.
Who else were you expecting?
With financial institutions pledging $170 trillion to collectively decarbonise and support poorer nations.
That's double the world's annual global GDP.
The gap between what governments have and what the world needs is large, and the private sector needs to play a bigger role.
They're not going to give up their money. Janet's just yelling to the wind.
What do we want?
And so are these guys.
The former female president of this conference says many have the right to feel excluded.
There is this saying that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And when it comes to climate change, it clearly has a bigger negative impact on women and girls around the world.
Boom, the female card.
A UN report found that the majority of negotiators and diplomats here are men.
It is a real struggle. Why? Because global negotiations are a bloke space.
Now, she was the president when the conference achieved nothing. And she's just laid the groundwork for the next excuse when they achieve nothing. Not enough women.
The New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet maintains that an annual land tax will be better than stamp duty as a way to tackle housing affordability.
So rather than extorting you out of one lump sum, which they just blow immediately, now they want a steady income.
He's
plan and proposal to abolish stamp duty, to phase it out, also because he wants to tackle housing affordability as one of his key issues as Premier.
Politicians, real estate agents and banks do not want housing affordability because it's less profitable when it is.
The other thing that we will start watching for is whether we're getting more cases coming in from overseas. Now, there's been the reporting on locally acquired and overseas acquired cases is a bit rough at the moment.
I.e., they're getting lazy.
As we've been hearing, news of Cleo Smith's rescue has been greeted with elation. It is the end of a traumatic 18 days for the 4-year-old and her family, but also for the wider Carnarvon community.
Wait till you hear this.
To look at the possible psychiatric toll of the events of the past 2.5 weeks, here's Tim Watson-Munro. Firstly, can I ask you how you reacted to the news yesterday that Cleo had been found? Was your reaction in any way tempered by your training as a psychiatrist and thoughts about Cleo's experience?
I'm a psychologist.
Top-notch journalist at the ABC.
The thoughts I had, I think, were shared by the nation, one of pure elation.
Is he here as an expert or for his own personal experiences?
I was walking the beach and I said yesterday it was one of the happiest beach walks I've had.
Oh, good for you.
But overall, what impacts would being forcibly taken away from parents and siblings have on a child Cleo's age?
Yes, please explain, because obviously the ABC doesn't consider any of us smart enough to understand or imagine for ourselves.
And my observations of this family at a distance is that it's a very loving, well-bonded and caring family.
Nothing like an expert opinion of a family from an expert who's never met the family.
Because I know from past experience, not dealing with child abduction cases, but where there's been huge trauma followed by relief.
What kind of expert is this guy?
The town's not responsible for this. One alleged offender is.
I take that back. Clearly he's a genius.
Finally, Tim, this has touched everyone across the country, hasn't it? But in particular, parents and carers with young kids whose instinct now must be not to let their children out of their sight. What's the best way for them to think about what's happened? And also, how should they talk to their children about the events in Carnarvon?
Finally, Tim, one pre-prepared attempt to drum up fear.
The debate over Australia's dumping of the French submarine deal is putting renewed focus on the looming capability gap when the Collins-class fleet is eventually decommissioned. Experts warn the Navy has limited replacement options available as it waits for nuclear-powered boats to arrive in 2 decades' time.
Now, before you go, 2 very important stories that the ABC conveniently places at the end of the bulletin, but you should pay close attention to.
So what is the capability gap Australia faces and what are the options?
Ros, the ageing Collins-class fleet has been in the water for a couple of decades now, but given that these nuclear subs aren't expected until 2040, there is the danger that 1 or 2 boats will be missing from the fleet and there will be somewhat of a capability gap in between the retirement of the Collins-class and the arrival of the nuclear boats. We could examine options such as leasing American or British subs. That's been publicly discussed by the government already. There could be the forward deployment of, say, US Virginia-class submarines in Western Australia. That's already been openly discussed.
Did you hear that?
There could be the forward deployment of, say, US Virginia-class submarines in Western Australia. That's already been openly discussed.
The ABC is the government's propaganda arm, and you just heard it. Nuclear-powered US submarines based in Western Australia. You've just been served a press release.
Or perhaps even the permanent basing of American vessels in the port of Fremantle.
Again?
Or perhaps even the permanent basing of American vessels in the port of Fremantle.
There's already a permanent US base in Darwin and no Australian was consulted, and now they're telling you that they're planning on putting a base in WA and they're not going to consult you again.
These are all options that are under consideration.
Combining and layering and creating systems of capability that, as you're indicating, do span air, sea surface, land, cyber, and systems that can operate to enable and connect in space. Now, we've got to think of defence capability as a system of systems across multiple domains.
General Angus Campbell.
Says it all, really. It appears the ABC's military correspondent doesn't understand what the military's saying. And to finish up, the next big war for oil.
Ethiopia has declared a 6-month state of emergency as rebel forces from the northern Tigray region threaten to move on the capital. The war between the Tigray People's Liberation Front and government troops started a year ago after the rebels seized military bases. The conflict has plunged 400,000 people into famine and forced more than 2.5 million residents to flee their homes.
Of course they are. Well, that's my first ever video. If you enjoyed the information, please click like and subscribe. I plan on doing some more. And if you enjoy news that you're never told and social comedy, check out my Facebook page, The Institute of Common Sense. Peace.